Who have you met that you believe to be irredeemable and entirely evil? I knew a kid in school who was so evil that the gang members at school reportedly beat his ass for picking on the disabled kids. He went crying to the teachers, who claimed they saw nothing anyway. Last I hears he's in federal prison for who knows what. The kid in middle school that came armed and intended to kill several individuals. He for whatever random reason told me specifically, I was not his friend, to not come to school the next day because he was going to kill several people. I told my teacher, then spent the rest of the day behind closed doors in interviews with the police. They let him come to school, then caught him coming off the bus with a backpack with guns and ammo. I never saw him again. But I was told he had threatened to kill me. That's been decades, but I still consider the fact that I might have to deal with him someday. Hopefully he has died of fentanyl or in jail or something and rid the world of his evil. This one guy I grew up with, countless downright cruel and vindictive acts from kindergarten to age 18. Hadn't seen him since high school. 14 years later, I read he was arrested after leading police on a high-speed chase through backcountry roads and crashing with a 2- and 4-year-old in the vehicle. Every single other bully or mean person I remember growing up with, I either came to see the totality of their character by the end of high school or as adults, but not this guy. Mom's sister manipulated my grieving grandma after my grandpa died, married a guy out of prison who forced my cousin to commit armed robbery which made him ineligible to enlist in the Navy, told everyone my mom beat the shit out of her, grabbed her arm, started pulling shit in the hospital room minutes after my grandma died, shoved my uncle and claimed he assaulted her, and keeps insisting that she deserves my grandma's money even though no one in the family claims her anymore, not even her own kids. Met a kid, he started bullying me and was just a bad guy. He had these eyes that were like looking into the eyes of a mannequin. No life behind them at all. Anyway, a few years later I read in the local newspaper that the guy kicked a delivery driver to death after he spoke in a foreign accent. The guy is an irredeemably evil nut job. Last I heard he was locked up. Hope he stays there. One of my dad's best friends, it turns out he's a pedophile and was raping his stepdaughter since she was about 10 through to when she left home at 18. It only came out a few years ago, and he was in prison last I knew. Growing up he always seemed nice enough. He was dad's best friend, so I assumed he was a nice guy. But apparently my dad's a bad judge of character. She's about my age, early 30s, and we spent a whole lot of time together as kids and you never would have known. She was always happy. We would hang out together just like any pair of kids growing up, and she never mentioned anything that made me question. She's grown into a remarkably well-adjusted woman. She's married, has kids, has a house and a dog. We haven't really spoken since I left the country about a decade ago, but from chats with my family about her and her siblings she is doing great. My brother murdered a fellow homeless person in cold blood over $20 and somehow got a plea deal for 6 years. Will never speak to him again and talk shit about him every chance I get, including to his face once he's out. He's been horrifically abusive since childhood, in every way, has had every chance to rehabilitate and refuses. That to me is pure evil. Knowing your issues hurt other people physically, sexually and emotionally and flat out refusing to do anything about it. There was a guy in my town, Daniel Ahern. If you hadn't been robbed at gunpoint by him, you knew someone that had. He was notorious for drugging girls, raping them, selling them to his friends. He once sold an ex of mine by just telling the guy to go talk to her. She would have fucked him anyways, and Daniel knew that, so he wanted to make a profit. He was an insanely huge piece of shit. His dad was a sheriff, so everything was always swept under the rug. Thankfully a few years ago he died in a horribly violent motorcycle accident. One of my neighbors when I was a kid, she used to come down to my house every once in a while and hang out, but you could just tell by looking at her that she didn't have any feelings, like she was faking all her emotions. She ended up stabbing a homeless guy to death in the street, like for no reason at all. I don't think she was any older than 20. She's in prison for the rest of her life now. I was in Walmart and was grabbing some stuff to make spaghetti. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up. No one was in the aisle in front of me, so I turned and a lady is walking with her kid who was maybe 7 or 8. I'm a nearly 6 foot tall big guy who isn't scared of much. The aura this kid was putting off scared the shit out of me. I'm convinced this kid was either the next major serial killer or actually possessed by a demon. I left immediately, left the store, left the basket by the entrance as I left and went to the other grocery store in town. I've not seen him since, but I would 100% know it if he walked near me again. I've met a murderer, gang members, drug dealers, WA presidents, and not one of them made me feel that way. I hope I never see him again. My stepson. There was always something off about him, but not in a way that required intervention. He was just an odd kid, who grew into a manipulative teen, who grew up to be a pedophile as an adult. He hides behind religion and denies anything he has done to his victims. Fled one country to one where he has full and free access to victims because of small-minded family mindsets. He's a master manipulator. It's terrifying. I believe an old coworker of my dad's is irredeemably evil. I was 14 to 15. But looked 12 to 13. When I first met him, and he had this empty look to him, like he smiled, was charming. Whatever, but his eyes were dead. I knew from the first second I saw him that something was missing. He was evil. He asked how old I was, if I was dating anyone, told my dad how beautiful I was while smiling this shark-like smile at me. I was properly skeeved out by this guy. I left when he tried to touch me. I sat in the car and waited for my dad for about 15 minutes. As soon as he closed the door, I turned to him and told him I never wanted to see that man again. I knew he was evil. Something was wrong about him. My dad just said okay and never brought me around again. Heard from my dad months later that the guy had been caught in a sting operation trying to buy a 12-year-old kid. I've never doubted my gut instinct since then. My own father. He's a schizophrenic cokehead and a very violent man. He abused me in every way possible for years, killed animals for fun by shooting them from outside his bedroom window, attended dog fights and has even admitted to killing animals by feeding them to his friend's large snake. Everything most people do not like in a person. He's exactly that. He is racist, homophobic, ableist, sexist, etc. Cares for no one but himself, and if you call him out on it, he is the victim and cries to other people about how horrible he's being treated because he manipulates everyone to believe that his isn't a monster behind closed doors. My ex-girlfriend's mother trash-talked me behind my back whenever I made a mistake or did something she didn't like. Trash-talked my parents right after they bought lunch for their family of 7. Trash-talked my mom over a Facebook post that was identical to something she posted. Turned my girlfriend against me and my family over the previously mentioned issues. Insulted me over text and then made my girlfriend dump me after I apparently didn't reply to her insults correctly. Took most of the money her adult children made as rent, since she wouldn't get a job to supplement her husband's income, causing her kids to go without decent winter gear, new shoes, reliable transportation, etc. Punched one of her own daughters in the face and threw things at her, causing her to run away to live with her boyfriend's family and cut contact with her. Went to the BF's family's house drunk and started screaming profanities at them and beating up their cars. Oh yeah. And she claims to be the most perfect and devout traditional Christian lady. I knew a guy in high school whose dad was an LA Metro cop. He was a big guy and he and his friend, while still in high school, would dress up in suits and take his dad's police badge and beat pimps and harass hookers for free blowjobs. I saw him at the 10-year reunion. He had become a Metro cop himself but was on leave and was being personally sued by 3 people for use of force violations. He said, "They fired me and after this is over I won't have a penny, but I'll always be able to get a job." He said there were cities out there that would hire anyone as a cop. I didn't even know him that well in high school and he was very open about all this. He had dead eyes like he didn't have a soul, and I'm sure he didn't make it to age 40. I was a teacher for about 8 years and I can get you now, even at the age of 13 to 14. A person can be identified as a sociopath or just plain evil. There was a girl who manipulated other kids into fighting each other. She was constantly being hauled to HM's office. When her parents came in, they were just as bad. You know someone who is just rotten to the core? No empathy at all, raised to see people as playthings? Yep, that was her. God knows what she does now. This lowlife I know from around the way. He's a woman-beating pedophile who is now in his 50s. He's never worked a day in his life, still going to the clubs, and when he's not living off some poor dumb girl he's living with his mom. Swear to God he's a living stereotype and I wish he would just die already. I taught 4th grade and had a student who just terrified me. He was mean, emotionless, and had this look on his eyes that was just blank. We had a morning meeting each day as a class and would always have a question of the day. One time he talked about how he enjoyed killing his pet rabbit. Another time he said he wished he could kill people just by looking at them. He didn't really have friends and was just quiet and scary. I would get stomach cramps each time I saw him walking to our classroom door and tried to not turn my back to him. It sounds awful, but he gave me school shooter vibes. I wouldn't be surprised if he came to school with a gun one day. I imagine he would kill someone and say he did it just to know what it felt like. That's the kind of vibe he gives me. My old housemate. At first he came off as a nice guy, but the more I got to know him the more I realized I needed to get away. He admitted to doing horrible things to other people. He told me he knew he was a narcissist, but how couldn't he be when he was so great at everything? I genuinely don't believe he could feel empathy at all. I didn't find out until later, but the only reason he wanted me to move in was so he could be with me sexually. And obviously I never let that happen. So he would get angry at me. After I got out I blocked him on everything, but I hate that he knows where I work. My second paramedic partner in EMS. Dude was a straight up sociopath, but the kind that's really charming and very good at manipulating people and controlling narratives. He had me under his spell for almost a year as well, until his lies caught up to him and his true colors spilled out. Turns out he's violent and has sadistic tendencies. He also faked a vasectomy, which we found out after he got his now ex-girlfriend pregnant. He eventually got a felony charge for drug trafficking in Nebraska, taped under the car. Apparently, somehow he avoided jail time, but he is a convicted felon. Now he works as a safety officer for a company in Oregon, which I'm fine with because it's on the other side of the country. He was a brilliant paramedic, and to his credit, he never mistreated a patient that I saw, but goddamn is he a shit human being. He's actually the entire reason I own a shotgun. Used to work at a prison. Inmate there was in jail for murder, 20+ year sentence, but he was probably in his 30s. I was walking around as they were handing out lunch, and he stopped me to chat. He then tells me the story of killing a little girl's puppy in front of her when she was young. The story was completely calm, slight smile, and his eyes were completely empty. He had no concept of guilt, or wrong, or immorality. First time I met a true sociopath. My father. He was never physically abusive to my brother or me, but he more than made up for that with our mom. He was psychologically abusive to all of us. He also was an admitted pedophile. He never was convicted of harming a child, but he was convicted of attempting to do so, with no jail time. I majored in criminal justice in college, and in one of my classes, one of the topics we discussed was antisocial personality disorder, formerly psychopathy. When we went over the diagnostic criteria, I had to resist the urge to scream. He ticked every box. Thankfully, that bastard has been dead for nearly 10 years. Extreme narcissist. The guy sent emails to me and my boss about my poor work performance while I was sitting at my dying mother's hospital bed. When I returned from that trip a week later, he was literally standing in my office with a tape measure. Apparently he took my absence as an opportunity to take my office. I have a higher job title than this guy to top it off. And no, he didn't get the office. If you guys liked this video, please drop a like and subscribe, and also check out my Instagram account Scary Time that is linked in the description, and as always, stay scary.